Good morning. It is September 18. This is the C4 Metro Subcommittee. Your co-chairs are here, Commissioner Savas and Councilor Sherman. The meeting is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner, my partner in crime, Councilor Brett Sherman, who's going to lead the show here today. So, Councilor.
Very good. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all this morning. It's always a great way to start the day, and especially with caffeine, it is also quite good. So, looks like kind of the normal cast of characters. So we'll just kind of jump right into it today. We've got a RIFA update. Really, it's more kind of broad J-packed issues, and I'm going to turn this thing over. Let's see. This morning, Karen Bjerg is the one who's going to drive this presentation and fill our heads full of all kinds of good information.
Super. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see everyone this morning. And we're here to talk about regional flexible funds allocation. And as you probably noticed on your screen, we've got a lot of staff here today because we're diving into this process. I am going to spend just a few minutes, giving an overview of the timeline for regional flexible funds. This is a process that happens, as you all may be familiar, and you're probably used to seeing my face talking about this, but it's a process that happens every 3 years. And it's a conversation with the region about how to spend the federal funds that come into the Portland metropolitan region. And so each time we do this, it looks a little bit different. And so in the past round, as you may recall, we were talking both about the regional flexible funds that came in to the region, but we were also talking about the nature and the neighborhood bond projects. This particular round, we will be talking about the regular, what we call step 2 projects in the local jurisdictions. They apply and there's an application process and whatnot in the selection process. But we also have the unique aspect of this one is looking at what's involved in step 1, which really are those regional, those previous commitments, but there's some ability to potentially bond more, bond a bit of that money that had been previously committed. And so it has been a selection process around that's been developed. So for this moment, I am going to share my screen just to show you the schedule. And let's see, and where we are. All right, so the regional flexible funds item has been on your committee agenda. I was looking back at the agendas and you spoke about it in April, May, and July. Basically, that was this first column. The program direction was being developed. And that's really where the step 1 conversation as well as step 2 conversation really was clarified that these are going to be the 2 categories that we're talking about. So that was February to July, but now we're in September. We're in the piece of the actual call for projects. And so all of my colleagues will be talking about that call for projects and kind of getting into how we are locally discussing this call for projects. And that happens from September to November. The next phase of regional flexible funds ends up happening between November and February. That's when the evaluation is done. There is sort of a deep dive at all of the projects that have been submitted. And then we get results back on how each of the submittals have been evaluated. And then in this section that some of you may remember from past times, in March to May, that's the public comment section. And that is when there is an opportunity as well for regional committees to identify if they have any priorities amongst the various applications that have been submitted as a part of their sub-region, or for us in Clackamas County. And then finally, the adoption of the Regional Flexible Funds Program for 2030 happens in July of 25. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. right now. That gives you an overview. Today, what we're going to talk about, actually, we're going to break it up into two sections. First, we're going to talk about the step one bond nominations. And what that process is like, and the nominations that have been moved forward from the jurisdictions in Clackamas County. And then we're going to talk about the step two projects. Right now, again, there's been Metro is instituting a slightly different process that involved jurisdictions submitting a letter of intent, and those were project ideas that they may be considering. So we'll have our staff then talk about which projects and kind of what the process is from here related to actually getting to nomination submittals. So before I hand it off, I do want to do an official sort of new introduction. I want to introduce folks to Jeff Owen. Jeff is the new principal transportation planner for Clackamas County. And Jeff will also be stepping into the TPAC role for Clackamas County. And so what that means for all of you is that you will be seeing Jeff Owen monthly at these particular meetings as the Clackamas County TPAC representative. And I will be stepping back a little bit and doing some other roles and responsibilities. So I just wanted to make that connection so you all will know why you're seeing Jeff and you're not seeing me. So welcome aboard, Jeff.
Thank you.
Certainly. And all right, so I'm going to pass it over to Jamie Stastny and Dana Webb, who will start off talking about the step one applications. But I guess maybe before I pass it off, I mean, are there any questions that folks have now, or we can kind of have questions after the step one conversation and then after step two?
Very good, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Karen, thanks for the good work and the introduction on this. I think everyone knows this, but I just want to clarify my understanding for the benefit of everyone else. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But as I understand it, the size of the projects, let's just say the projects that are larger in cost, ideally can be addressed with a step one, and typically the awards for step two are much smaller. I want to clarify that. Is that correct?
So what I would say yes, and there are specific direction about the types of projects that are appropriate for step one. So historically, step one it bonds some of the regional flexible funds that come in, and that in the past, these investments have, for the most part, been used to support high capacity transit and various TriMet investments. So, and that the type of support maybe that end up being that regional portion commitment that is able to leverage other funding sources. So as a part of the program direction, there was kind of a deep dive into the discussion of the types of projects that are appropriate for that step one. And then there's step two. And as you said, totally correct, is those are typically smaller dollar projects. But what we're talking about really in that step two, there is actually a minimum project size in step two, which right now is $4 million. In the past, the general size really has ranged probably from $3 million to $6 or $7 million per project. I mean, it really depends, but that's more the size of a project for step two. And they're looking both at construction projects, and there's a kind of a lower, smaller size that would be allocated to a just a planning and development. But okay.
And then the next one I want to just clarify is that the deadline for submitting projects for step one has passed. That was September 6th, correct?
Absolutely correct. So they're not on completely parallel tracks. This part of nominating projects for step one is brand new, right? It hasn't happened in previous rounds in this same manner. And so the process there is that jurisdictions were asked to nominate the projects by September 6th, and they're entering into kind of an initial evaluation to see if the project proposals kind of align with the program direction.
Okay, I just think my last is more of a comment, so no response needed, Karen. Thank you. And that is that the regional flexible funds, those federal dollars, are really flexible. And I think it's time that we as a region think outside the box and not box ourselves in locally to what we did in the past. We know we already did this way, so we shall do it this way in the future. Whether that is all the flexible funds go to transit only, or all the flexible funds go to capital, but those are self-imposed. I want to make that perfectly clear. And I think we need to think outside the box if we're really truly going to develop transit projects or transit-oriented projects. We got to start somewhere, and I'm just hoping that both our flexibility is kept open, and maybe that's a message to the Metro councilors, as well as the JPAC members, and lastly, the type of bonds we select. We choose bonds perhaps that have some more flexibility and can do planning projects versus capital projects. So those are some levers we can pull, and I'm just hoping again we can think outside the box. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Lewis, a comment?
Sure. My only comment is that to the degree that we treat them as flexible funds, it's within the greater context of congestion mitigation and air quality, because the big bulk of the funds are called CMAQ funds. We blend and braid and do some clever work to make sure that we do keep them flexible, but the federal dollars that we're drawing down need to be relieving congestion and helping air quality.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So are we turning this over to Jamie and Dana for our step one discussion, please?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Jamie Stasny from Clackamas County. I am at Metro this morning. We have an MTAC meeting at 9 o'clock. So we are here coming to you live from Metro Central. Wanted to share a little bit about step one. There is, as Karen was saying, a new process for step 1A projects to be proposed or nominated by agencies. The criteria that was developed, and a lot of this went through JPACT for these projects, is that they are transit projects. They are traditionally, as Karen was saying, projects that will be high capacity transit projects, kind of our local match. And those projects are traditionally funded through what's called SIG funding. So it's kind of that pathway for high capacity transit projects. There hasn't been a process, also, as Karen was saying, so everything is new and we're figuring it out. They also opened up this step 1A opportunity, which is a little more broad. In the past, it's just been, like I said, high capacity transit. This time, they opened it up to allow projects that are first last mile transit projects, access to transit projects, and transit signal priority projects to be nominated. So that opens up the door a little bit toward building ridership instead of just taking existing ridership or high ridership lines to high capacity transit. So it is, I think, exciting to see the door opening up a little bit to really think about how do we build ridership and make transit a viable option in communities where it hasn't been in the past. So I'll just speak to broadly the applications. 10 applications or nominations were submitted for this category. $1.39 billion worth of projects were submitted. The total bond that's so far been requested over the life, the whole bond is only $181 million. So I know that kind of mind blown, that's a lot of money, a lot of projects, right? I will say the 1.39 billion did not all come from Clackamas County. In fact, we only had 2 applications. We're trying to be really thoughtful because they still, JPACT and Metro Council still haven't decided how big the bond will actually be. So we were trying to be really thoughtful about right sizing our requests, making it meaningful to the projects that are priorities that we really want to see move forward, but still being thoughtful about making sure there's enough space for other projects around the region to be included in the bond as well. So I'll speak first just to the project that Clackamas County submitted, and then I'll hold some space for Dana to share the project that Oregon City submitted. So Clackamas County worked really hard with our team. Many of you may know we're in the middle of the Sunrise Visioning project right now out on Highway 212. Probably heard about this, been a priority of our county for 40 years or more, Commissioner, somewhere around there. We got $4 million a few years back in 2022 from the state legislature to do a big visioning project. And part of that is working to do community engagement to get feedback on ODOT's Sunrise Gateway project, which is the big transportation component in the corridor. And as part of that, as we're developing that, we identified that there are some critical components that will support transit that are a part of that project. So our project request is $15 million. That $15 million would be used to take the Sunrise Gateway project through the reevaluation that we think will be necessary. There's already a record of decision and at the IS on it, but it's evolved over time. Things change. So we'll need a reevaluation as well as 100% design for the middle section of the project. Any of you who are involved in T2020 would know that as the Safety and Local Connections project. That was the part of the project that was going to be completely constructed if T2020 would have passed and been approved. So that piece of the project would be 100% designed and then about 10% designed for the whole project, just because we need that to get to 100% on the middle section. So that is what our ask is for. And it is a little different than a normal, like, hey, we want a faster bus line or we want to add more stops. There are a lot of access to transit components within that project that will be developed through this process. But one thing we've been trying to think about, I think Commissioner Savas, to your point, want to leave space to be creative and make sure we're able to invest in areas that are going to be high growth so that we can be proactive and get ahead of some needs instead of just waiting until we have a big problem and it's more difficult to fix. So the idea is let's get the correct system in place to make sure that the trips have safe places to be for all modes and that people can travel safely through the corridor. And part of that in this corridor is pulling that apart and having this system approach, which is what will be designed through this process. So I won't go more deeply into it, but I will say a little plug for Sunrise. We have an open house coming up on September 24th at Adrian Nelson High School, 5:30 p.m. If you're interested, you want to come find out what we're doing, we'd love to have you join us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dana to talk about Oregon City's project, unless anyone has questions.
Very good. Dana, you're up.
Good morning, C4 Metro, Dana Webb with the City of Oregon City. Just share a little bit with you about the project that Oregon City has nominated for the Step 1 program. Our nomination is under the first last mile and safe access to transit category. Our total project cost is in the $9 million range. And our project is really taking our current regional flexible fund Step 2 project development work along OR 9090 or McLaughlin Boulevard and advancing that to the next step. So we're currently wrapping up our alternatives analysis for that section. It's looking at from 10th Street to Tumwater Village, which we refer to as our phase 3. We've completed design and construction of phases 1 and 2. And so this really is kind of that last section of the corridor. The project does not include the bridge structure that is proposed in our current work. So this is sort of the low-hanging fruit of the corridor, getting that pedestrian, bicycle, and transit access from 10th to Tumwater. The other component of our project is really working to leverage other transit and walking and biking projects in the corridor. So if you're not familiar with downtown Oregon City, TriMet is moving forward with construction of a new transit center in the location of our existing transit center. And then TriMet is also working on transit signal prioritization for our line 33 that runs from our transit center, essentially through kind of the core of Oregon City and then up to Clackamas Community College. And so our proposed project would look to review that line 33 corridor and see what improvements we could do outside of the transit signal prioritization to support that line. That could be ADA ramp improvements, better connections and access to those bus stops. So really looking to leverage those two projects moving forward for transit and tie that with our McLaughlin Boulevard work. Really, the project also comes out of that T2020 work. So again, this isn't a new project. This is a project the city's been working on for 20 plus years. So that's kind of my short information, if there's any questions.
Very good. Mayor Milch, you're first up.
You mentioned bicycles in that corridor. Are you planning to have bicycles share the road with buses and cars, or are you looking to develop some separated routes for bikes?
So in our bigger corridor planning, we actually are showing a separated bicycle and pedestrian path between 9090 and the river. That is a large structure and not within the funding allowance of this program. So this is kind of that first step. We would look to get some wider sidewalks on McLaughlin Boulevard. And then a bicycle could make a choice if they want to choose in-lane travel or utilizing a wider sidewalk, or also looking at Main Street through that section if they weren't comfortable riding on 9090.
Very good. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you very much. Just had maybe a technical question about the federalization potential of these projects, because I understand that normally when we receive, a jurisdiction receives these RFFA funds, it does become federalized, which would mean maybe another $400,000 or $500,000 incurred for the compliance cost. And I just wondered, since these are being used to pay off a bond, as I understand, would that still apply?
So I think that's a very good question. But I will say that both of these projects that we just talked about have been involved in the federal process in the past. Mm-hmm. So for at least the projects that Clackamas County is talking about, the fact that they may be required to become federalized, it's not an issue. But I don't know, I can't say for certain, right, that exactly what the details are on the requirements related to the bonding process.
Thank you.
Very good. Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Councilor Sherman. Dana, what is the so just to clarify, the 9 million, this is all for this is construction capital?
Correct. That would be for design and construction of those improvements on 9090 and then improvements along that line 33 route.
Okay. And if I could ask, go back, sorry, to Jamie and the Sunrise, just to clarify on that too. So for this, what is kind of like the overall cost of the Sunrise project, and what's the fund, like kind of the plan for funding the construction of it?
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Great question. So the funds that we're looking for this are just project development, which I think that was already clear, but just to make sure everyone understands, project development, early funds, it'd kind of be that first money in that would put us in a position to be able to leverage that to get more federal funds to be able to fund portions of the project. Just as they constructed phase 1 of that project, the rest of the project will likely also be constructed in phases. And part of that work will be developed with ODOT kind of leading that as part of the Sunrise Visioning project. So we'll be able to show you different pieces and parts of the package. We are working on cost estimates right now. I think around $500 million for the whole thing is about what we're ballparking, but please don't quote me on that. We'll have more details as we get further along. We have looked at that Safety and Local Connections project and understand that we could construct that for about $140 million. So we know that that middle piece that would be basically 100% design ready to go would be, fairly low cost to actually construct. And there's a ton of independent utility with this piece that we're adding. It would actually help traffic move better, so relieve congestion. It would add these other mode options and elevate safety in the whole corridor. So there's a lot of pieces to Councilor Lewis's comments that would be supporting those goals of reducing greenhouse gases and relieving congestion.
Very good. Any other questions or comments before we jump into our step 2 discussion? All right. Am I throwing this back to Karen, or shall I just drop it right in Jeff and Will's lap?
Yeah, I think I'll just say just a few words. So I'm hoping that Jeff and Will can talk about slightly the fact that there's been the new letter of intent as a part of this process, and really just sort of high level about the various projects, not much detail about the various projects that are being considered to be submitted, and then what we anticipate that nomination process to be, or the submittal process to be. So it's all Jeff and Will.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. And thank you all. Jeff Owen with Clackamas County, Principal Planner. So in your packet is the short memo from Metro about step 2 specifically, and a couple of pages of the full table of all the projects that partners submitted through the letter of intent process. So where we are currently in the process now for step 2 is on August 26th. Metro did ask for a new piece of this cycle for a letter of intent. And so at that time, that was an early look at the different types of projects all the partners in the region were thinking about submitting, but that was not quite the official submittal. That was just a first step to kind of show what partners were thinking about. Metro encouraged partners to go ahead and include things that could be possible, even if that list later gets to be narrower and smaller. And so what you see there, similar to step 1, is a bit of a higher number of total requested funds through the letter of intent process for around $232 million. The likely total amount of funds available through just step 2 is going to be much closer towards a $50 million figure. So I think Metro had last estimated maybe between 47 and 62 million would be available for this cycle just for step 2. So what we expect to see between now and November 15th, when applications are due, is that all the projects on that list that you see in the yellow tables will effectively get kind of narrowed down. So for example, at the county level, we submitted 5 at the time. We do not plan to submit all 5 in November. So we are going through a process just like all the partners are of taking a closer look and sharpening pencils to see which projects would most likely fit this particular bucket of funding. Metro Council and JPACT have given program direction, as we've hinted at here previously, for the types of projects that would compete best for this pot of funding. So what we will be doing, instead of kind of touching on all of these, as Karen mentioned, we just wanted to include in your packet that total picture so you know the types of projects. Step 2 is usually much more about constructing improvements for access to transit and multimodal options within the obligation window. So projects that mostly speaking have already had some design, and they will be building things on the ground within this window of time. Whereas step 1 sometimes is that larger need to help projects get to construction. Step 2 should be a little more ready, generally smaller projects that might range between 4 million and 7, 8, maybe up to 9 million, but there's kind of a sweet spot there. So that's a little bit of a high level just summary. So what we'll be seeing in the months ahead through the regional coordination at CTAC, as well as larger coordination at TPAC, partners will be internally kind of doing a little bit more work at the staff level to refine projects that are the best fit and narrow that total list down to a shorter list. Our last CTAC meeting at the staff level, everyone did kind of basically say that we don't think we will be hitting what is the Clackamas County cap of 10 projects for this particular step 2 bucket. So we will likely be under that cap of 10. So you'll see this list get a bit much shorter and focused as cost estimates are refined. Into the months ahead, TPAC and CTAC and all the coordinating groups between staff levels will be advancing these projects and getting them closer to the full submittal due on November 15th. Metro has provided a workshop where all of the likely submitters learned about the system to submit these projects and all the different requirements. So a couple of comments here already this morning have touched on the process, and there are a couple of strings attached with how the process is set up and what projects would need to submit to score well against the criteria and the program direction. So we've got a few months here ahead of us to sharpen our pencils and make sure that all submittals in the county and around the region fit the criteria well. So sorry, I might have taken some thunder from Will. Will, anything else to add to that before we take some questions on the step 2?
No, you covered most of it quite well. I wanted to add that as part of the letters of intent, Metro has offered some assistance to local jurisdictions to provide a better application. We were able to request either a tier 1 or a tier 2 assistance to help develop our applications. So that's something this year that Jamie Lorenzini and Karen both worked really hard on, kind of getting Metro to lend a helping hand to make smaller jurisdictions more competitive in the bigger scheme. I can add that there was, in the initial projects, there was 13 letters of intent that showed us Clackamas County and its local jurisdictions submitted that totaled for about $65 million. Again, as Jeff said, we will be paring that down over the next couple weeks, trying to figure out which projects are the best to move forward for Clackamas County.
Very good. Thank you both. Excuse me for the comments, and any questions. I guess one question I always kind of have as we look at this is, I think historically has money been distributed across the region, in a certain methodology, or I know as other types of funding sources we've seen historically where a project is awarded in one area and say they kind of make an effort to distribute those assets in a different area in the future, and really my question is more about kind of from a strategic perspective, do we have a calculation that says, it's better for us to have more projects and whittle away and have some kind of picked off, or is it better to have a really narrow list where we're really kind of demonstrating the need, or is it really each project stands on its own merits and it really that's immaterial? Does that make sense?
It does, and welcome Commissioner Savas to chime in on that as well. I know he's been through this many times. The I would say it's a little bit of all the above. There is definitely a lot of strategy involved, and the process to actually submit one of these projects is quite thorough. And so all the partners, even if they, even if we start with a list of wanting to submit a few, once you really open up all the materials for submittal, it's quite a burden on staff, even of different sizes of jurisdictions, to make a full submittal. And so it does tend to lean itself towards zeroing in on the 1 or 2 projects that really might stand the best chance of scoring well through the whole process. So I'll pause there and see if anybody wants to add to that.
Very good. Or Commissioner Savas, a comment in line, or do you have something different?
Well, something, on this very note, I appreciate the mention and the fact that Metro does assist the smaller jurisdictions that have less staff and have, don't have the ability to get some of these projects that are ripe, if you will, I'll use that word. And my question is, some of our other big partners, TriMet and ODOT. I don't know if anyone from ODOT is on our screen here today, but at least from TriMet, does TriMet do the same? Do they assist some of the smaller jurisdictions in design and helping to advance projects and design and so forth?
I'm actually not sure, Commissioner. Are you talking about from a technical perspective?
Well, yes. I mean, again, what we have in Clackamas County is a lot of smaller cities than our neighbors to the west. That's the way it is. And those cities on the west have robust staff and resources, and some of our smaller jurisdictions have really small staff, little staff. So we are we're handicapped in the sense that without the assistance to develop these projects, to get them ripe and ready, so they can at least come into that zone where, the 1 or 2 or 3 that are most likely to be successful. If we never get there, we never get there. So my question is, do we get assistance like Metro offers to those smaller jurisdictions from TriMet? No one, you can't, John, thanks for your help, but you can't answer the question with ODOT, but maybe someone can say, Jeff or Karen or Jamie or others can maybe answer that question.
Yeah, I would add in generally, I think the answer is yes, that TriMet, ODOT, and others do help in this process along the way with any partners that reach out. TriMet and others often, might look to step 1 or for a larger effort, but in step 2, ODOT and TriMet and others are very helpful as partners to make sure and feed the right information into the applicants.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, if you're hearing from jurisdictions that have needs that aren't being addressed, please feel free to reach out and we'll see if there's anything that we can do to help.
Yeah. I want to just say this with respect, and that is, I'll just use Portland for an example because they probably have the deepest bench, if you will, from a staffing standpoint, as far as cities or counties. They are woefully successful in project development, and they can bring so much to the table. It's hard to compete, even with the assistance from TriMet or ODOT or Metro. So that's a tough one for us, and just want to put that out there that I think we have that handicap, and it's got to be on the table that we need that assistance. And I do appreciate assistance that's being given. So thank you.
Yeah, I hear that.
Excellent. And just a very brief last word there for Will had mentioned that part of what Metro has done this cycle is introduce that idea of assistance through a consultant team as well. So we have seen some jurisdictions say they do need to raise their hand and say, we'd like some help to develop a really competitive application.
Very good. Any final comments before we jump into the next segment? Mr. Brashear.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Commissioner Savis's question. I think we need to make it clear that, and this has been our experience here at SMART, having reached out to TriMet in the past, if it's of a competitive nature, if it's a grant and it's competitive, TriMet will not assist you. They'll make it clear that it's a competitive grant that they too may be applying for, and so they're less likely to help, and there is competition involved. Again, our experience here at SMART. So just to throw that out there.
And Dwight, I would just respond to say that, yeah, that might be true for things like federal grants, but for situations like REFA or something like that, we're certainly all applying for things. I don't know if that would apply in a situation like this.
Right, and you don't know, John, but I'm just saying that, that's been our experience. So I didn't want to let that, slide. So.
Very good, Karen.
So the last words that I would say is in the last round, one of the things that it appeared is that that Clackamas County jurisdictions didn't submit as many grants, and perhaps that led to less investment within Clackamas County. I think we've all learned from that. And it does appear that various jurisdictions are thinking about how they could how these federal dollars could be spent appropriately within their jurisdiction. And so that's exciting to see. So we have a year ahead of us, or 9 months ahead of us. You'll be hearing from us again about regional flexible funds. And then the last little note that I put in the chat is there is a website. Metro has a website all about regional flexible funds. And I noticed this morning in the background section at the bottom of the page is a really nice video about the trolley trail and how in the past the trolley trail did receive funds through regional flexible funds. So I'd suggest that you all take a look at that video. It's only 1 minute, 20 seconds, but really is, it kind of demonstrates sort of how these funds really help all of our jurisdictions. So with that, I will pass it back over to you, Trent.
Okay, thank you. Also at tomorrow's JPAC meeting will be a discussion about the JPAC priorities for the 2025 transportation package. And so this has been brewing over the course of the year. We are always hearing about the Joint Committee on Transportation's effort to produce a transportation package in 2025. They are currently near the end of their 12-meeting tour, and the 11th meeting happens to be in Happy Valley next Thursday. Show up, please. It'll be great. The more people that show up, the better. There's a bunch of coordination going on. If you haven't emailed me about your interest to attend, please do so. We are trying to coordinate all that, but this is a conversation about the JPAC priorities. So in the summertime, staff, policy staff, lobby staff, and others from around the region came together and drafted what you see there on page 12 and 13 of your current packet. And that was initially discussed by the JPAC members at their, I guess their July meeting, because there wasn't an August meeting. So at their July meeting, and at that time, members were asked to provide feedback ahead of the September meeting with the intent to approve those priorities at the JPAC's November meeting. However, the feedback that came in was very limited. There was not very much feedback to the initial draft that was produced. There is a red line version in the JPAC packet, not in our packet. What you see is what was, I think, shared back in July. The feedback that was given was really around making sure that local formulas like 50-30-20 were not just protected in the existing funding, but also into future funding schemes. So I think that would land very well within priorities within this table, and that matches with our conversations at C4, the big C4 table that produced and supported the values and outcomes document, as well as other conversations or language that sort of supports the economic development and access to freight for things like the port and the airport and so on. So the feedback at the staff level has been that because there has been such little feedback, which has been interpreted maybe a little bit as mostly supportive, I think there will be a conversation tomorrow about, is JPAC interested in just moving the approval of that up to October rather than waiting all the way to November, so that you have more time, or that the group in the region has more time to advocate on behalf of those principles ahead of the legislative session. That's just one more month, but time is money. Transportation package is money. So hopefully those things come together. So that's going to be part of your conversation tomorrow. As I said, I think a lot of the language in the JPAC priorities aligns with the values and outcomes document that C4 produced. I am pleased to report that yesterday I was informed the final 2 cities that participate in C4 anyway provided their logo to the values and outcomes document. So that is all 12 of our major operating attending cities and the county. That's great news. That's great turnout. So I'm going to finalize that document today and make sure that we all have it. I'm going to submit it into the record next Thursday for the Joint Committee on Transportation, so that they're familiar and have access to our materials and our language for ahead of the transportation package. So that's the update on the JPAC priorities, and a little bit of extra comments about the county's values and outcome document too.
Very good. Thank you, Trent. Commissioner Savis.
Yeah, one question. I just reviewed the document in the packet, and I'm just gonna that under the finish what we started bullet and the HB 2017 projects and the 50-30-20, specifically in parentheses it says 50-30-20 or better. Can someone define or have an idea what or better means? Because that just sounds like something that could be interpreted any which way.
I certainly can't. I think that there is, who knows? But that's a good clarifying question at tomorrow's meeting. Maybe 50 to the counties and 40 to the cities and 10 to the state. Is that better for everybody here? Sorry, Neelam's over in the audience, but yeah, maybe it's better for the local jurisdictions or the region jurisdictions. I think just I'm the staff person that helps the county, but also we talk a lot regionally. 50-30-20, if it moves in any direction, creates division amongst all of us. And so it would be my recommendation that the or better language would not necessarily be helpful to a broader conversation, but that's just Trent's opinion here shared with all of my friends and partners here at Clackamas County.
Very good. Better is all in the perspective of the person reading it. So fair enough. Any other questions or comments for Trent before we jump into our TPAC update? Very good. Throwing this back to Jeff and Will.
Great, thank you, and happy to keep this probably a little bit shorter if we need to today. So in your packet, starting on page 14, is a few pages about TPAC items from your team TPAC, which is many of us, including one who couldn't be here today. So the first item I did want to mention real quick is that there are some redistribution funds that are being made available to past awarded projects. And so, as we all know, in recent year and two here, projects are becoming more expensive with inflation and other issues. And so there are some funds specifically for redistribution to previously awarded projects. And so there are a couple of those that are within the county. Metro has already started reaching out and trying to understand and clarify with project managers, which ones might need additional funds to get all the way to completion and kind of why and start that process. So that's the first thing there on the TPAC list. You might have noticed if you were looking month to month, there was a fatal crash update, and that total number was 28 traffic deaths. That's a little larger than normal because it's 2 months, July and August reporting. So that's always a very sobering moment of all the work we do. What we also want to mention therein at the TPAC table is that Metro is also coordinating ways to share best practices to prevent and kind of attack that number, to reduce it and get it all the way down to zero if possible. So each meeting does include some report outs from partners on best practices for reducing traffic deaths. We did cover a transit minute, and every month we will do that in the spirit of supporting JPACT in that endeavor to make sure and get updates on ridership around the region. That's more than just TriMet's ridership. That's the larger picture of how we're doing as a region, getting back from pre-COVID ridership, which is really kind of good for everyone in all modes. Much of TPAC's time is also touching on the RUFA that we've just covered already in today, so that will continue to be a big part of what TPAC focuses on. And then I would say there's also the next few months at TPAC, we'll hear from a number of items under the heading of the Regional Transportation Plan implementation and local TSP support, TSP being the Transportation System Plans. At the county, we are just about to start probably roughly a 2-year update of our transportation system plan. And so all of these plans do relate to each other, and what Metro has shared at the previous TPAC meeting, a number of bullets there of items that support the RTP that was recently adopted in the past, and items that are posted online for everyone to see and to access, and then to give updates on lots of different efforts that support the RTP in general. So I don't want to go too much into depth on all of those, but they're listed there in your packet, and happy to take questions on those if there's additional. We do have a graphic pasted in on page 16 of your packet that is from the TriMet update that some of you might have seen, of showing a vision for new service. And so we did hear from TriMet at the TPAC table about some of those visions for the future and how to improve service around the county as well as different parts of their service area. And so finally there on page 17 of your packet is a brief look ahead of TPAC items that of course support the JPACT monthly meetings going forward, along with the listing of staff contacts there. So we are all happy to be at your service if there's anything we can do to further kind of help and support you and clarify. And I think, again, this one I'm sharing with Will. So Will, anything to add in there?
Nope, you covered it all on that one.
Very good. Mayor Milch, question.
On transportation system plans, I would imagine that individual cities do their plans at different times, that they're not a coordinated cycle. So the fact that the county's working on some right now, if an individual city said ours needs updating, we need to get to work on this too. Is there help and support? Is the timing good to be working on them simultaneously? Say a little bit about that.
Sure, that's a great question. So generally the TSPs are updated roughly every 10 years or so as a kind of a general rule of thumb, because our communities do grow and change and things change. It's a big effort to update them, whether it's a city or county effort. There's a lot of analysis, and so it can't quite happen, every year or two. Currently, at this time, this is a very interesting time to update the TSPs because of all the different regulations and rules that have been passed at the state level. And so there have been a few TSPs that have gotten underway for updates. And in a lot of the new challenge is coordinating that work with some of the new rules in place at the state level. So yes, part of Metro's presentation for the RTP and TSP assistance is mentioned in the report there, but I will say there's still quite a bit of active discussion between partners at the state, partners here in the region, counties and cities as to how best to coordinate and align with some of these different rules. So that's not a very clear answer to what you mentioned, but it's always a little bit of an interesting time to do a TSP update. They are a snapshot in time, and they do their best to look ahead 20 years and think of all the plans that are needed for the next 20 years, projects and plans and programs. So I'll pause there. It's a challenging time to do an update now, but it is very important as well to do an update and to coordinate and be in alignment with all the new state regulations as well.
Very good, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, this is more, just fodder, I think, for our technical staff, whether it's county staff or city staff or Metro staff. And I appreciate you all and the good work that you all do and your thinking about the system. So when we talk about the systems, you all know that I'm an advocate for transit, especially things like shuttles, especially in recognizing that Clackamas County is a suburban county and rural. And, getting, things like local shuttles and jitneys to get people onto the main line, whether we're in a topographical challenge area like Oregon City or Oak Grove and so forth, or wherever we're on in the county, try to fill those gaps where we have transit deserts. So that's part of that growing that transit thing. And I do recognize the air quality purpose of what the MPOs are all about. That said, and knowing ridership is struggling and maybe it's coming back, stronger. I'd always like to see those numbers. I'm also recognizing, and I know Wilsonville can probably attest to this, that it seems to me that I talk about the commute shed, but it amazes me how much I bump into people that now live outside the metro region and commute in every day, especially through I-5, coming in from Marion County or coming in from Southwest Washington. Are we tracking that? Is staff tracking the amount of people that are coming in from Woodburn or coming down from Hood River? Is that outpacing our ridership gains? I mean, don't need any answers today, but I just hope that we're looking at that. Thank you.
Very good comments. Appreciate that. Let's transition into our MPAC update since we do have a pretty full calendar today. So we've got a UGR recommendation update. Looks like Jamie, Martha, and Laura, you are on.
Thank you. Yes, we're back. We're talking land use now. So we have an MPAC update for you. I am actually just going to do a quick introduction, then turn it over to Laura and Martha Fritzy. So we have all been working together through the MTAC update, which actually we're going to not be providing today. So I'll just note there's an MTAC staff report in your packet. It's the last 3 or 4 pages of your packet. And that MTAC staff report is an effort to level up our land use support for this group based on feedback we got during C4 retreat, right? Wanted to see some leveling up. So you're getting the same information for the land use side of things that you are for the transportation side. Obviously, we have some work to do because our transportation and TPAC team is on fire. They're so good, so consistent. You've been getting that TPAC staff report. Now you have an MTAC staff report. So you're able to see what we're hearing, what we're getting through those meetings, and we're trying to connect the dots for you so you have that additional information. I'll just note that that is being prepared in partnership with all our cities. So the county staff is taking the lead on drafting it. We're circulating it with all the MTAC city partners and getting their feedback before we put it in your packet. Thank you, Trent. So just wanted to let you know that's in there. We won't have an MTAC report today because we're here for MTAC. So we'll just have this agenda item on the UGR because that's what we're talking about, MTAC as well. So with that, thank you for giving us time to walk through this with you today. You've heard about it already from Aaron and Ted at Metro. And now we're going to share a little bit of staff perspective on what's going on with the UGR. Laura and Martha. And Martha may want to do an introduction. I don't know if she's been here with the group before.
Hi, good morning. I'm Martha Fritzy. I'm a principal planner with the county's Planning and Zoning Division. And I am here, I think, mostly for questions and some context, because I have been involved sort of on the technical side in the urban growth reports, I think the last 3 rounds of the urban growth report. And so they, Metro puts together an advisory group called LUTAG, the Land Use Technical Advisory Group. And I have been a member of that, and so have been digging down deep into some of the numbers involved. But I think that today's presentation is really sort of the highlights of the outcomes and the recommendation from Metro's Chief Operating Officer, and then, of course, any, hopefully we can field any questions, understanding that this is not our report and our analysis, but Laura and I have been very involved in the process. That was my really long-winded introduction. I don't know if you want to jump into the slides now, Laura. We hadn't really discussed the tag team handoff portion of this presentation.
That was a good introduction. Martha's the brains behind the operation. I'm just going to give a high-level overview of what's going on with the urban growth management decision. So in July, we had a draft urban growth report, which is a long way of saying that we have a foundation of data and analysis by which the Metro Council can make the decision to expand the urban growth boundary or not. That report was created using a lot of data. I would say that the data and analysis this round was better than past rounds. We're also taking and analyzing lots of jurisdictions in their zoning, rolling it up into a regional model, making assumptions. And so we're looking at this regional scale. There was a lot of opportunity for input, like Martha identified with the Land Use Technical Advisory Group. Also, the data got sent out to all the jurisdictions who had opportunities for direct input, and there were other advisory groups along the way as well. So with this, the report included a range of growth assumptions. So are we going really fast? Are we going very slow? Are we keeping as is? And so because of that, the conclusions of the report provide a range. And so in some cases, it says we may need some type of acreage, and in others we may not, depending on how you look at the range. And so as a result, the conclusion was that Metro Council could be justified in expanding the urban growth boundary or not, which I didn't want to start with that because that's not a really good way, because there was a lot of data and analysis that went into providing that decision. So as a summary or example, for single family housing, we either need 20 or 2,000 units, or we have a surplus of 32,000 units. Multifamily, we either need 24,000 in the next 20 years, or we have 4,000 extra. Employment, the range is from a deficit of 1,800 to a plus of 800. So really some of these ranges are not that big. On the industrial side of the house, the report acknowledged that we have a lot of industrial land within the urban growth boundary, but there are things that are making these industrial lands not develop. They might not have the right site characteristics, or there could be other impediments towards development. There was one application to expand the UGB, and that comes from Sherwood. So Sherwood went through a couple year-long process to create a concept plan with their community. So there's densities and other targets that they have to meet when they put together a plan. They put together a plan, propose it up to Metro, and then Metro Council is ultimately the one that makes that decision. In the Sherwood West plan, as you can see on the map, there is more industrial towards the north, and then residential towards the middle. And then at the south side, there's some hospitality. I would say when MTAC talked about this plan initially, I think there was a fair amount of confusion about density and housing. So in the end, they believe that there's likely going to be about 3,000 housing units and about 4,500 jobs that are likely. The Metro COO made a recommendation. So the original report in July was just, here's the data, no recommendation. Now this is the recommendation that recently came out from the COO. With the recommendation, the conclusion was that Metro would be justified in expanding the urban growth boundary to include Sherwood West, and that the Metro Council should consider conditions. This is important because it's not like a typical staff report you would see where there's very specific conditions or there's a certain combination of conditions. It just says, here's some topics that maybe the Metro Council has some latitude to talk about and they can condition more. Metro has in these decisions before, it is normal for them to condition items onto the development. It is less normal to have conditions that go beyond what maybe Sherwood West is, or things that are broader than just the specific development proposal before them. So I'm going to go through these general topic areas of potential conditions on Sherwood West. Sherwood West has a potential condition where maybe the council could think about increasing housing units. In the past, there have been small conditions to increase sort of incrementally some of the housing units or densities. Could be a discussion on how the method for doing that, but maybe bumping up the density a little bit. Sherwood had a 2-year process to create the plan and obviously prefers the density of the plan that they had talked about. So this one and the next one of adding affordable housing sort of highlight the issue of when you have a local jurisdiction creating a plan with the community and proposing something, and then it going through this larger process of which the Metro Council is decision maker. Like, what does that look like in that interplay between the plan process and this? So on one hand, is this something that the region needs and wants? And did we show that we have these needs and wants? And then on the other hand, like, what is the metrics that the local jurisdiction needs to meet, and did they meet it, and where is that line? Another one is protections for large industrial sites. One of the reasons this includes industrial land, and so we really want to make sure that there is protection for that industrial land. We do want large industrial sites specifically for high-tech manufacturing. There was no recommendations for specific conditions or anything like that. So like an example could be Title IV, designating some of that land as Title IV. And then the last one is broader community engagement. So this plan was created with a lot of engagement. Most of that engagement, as with most concept plans, comes from the people who are there right now. So was there anyone beyond who lives there now, or community members or representatives of community members who have been historically marginalized in the past? And then there's another set of potential conditions of approval that go beyond the development itself and kind of look at this process as a whole. One is the slope impact on employment lands. Like, did we get that number technically right, or should it be changed? There was a recommendation to change that slope. The other one is we should look at continuing to update our region's vision for the future. Some of them are old, as we know that we are kind of look at the 2040 plan and other regional plans moving forward. So some of that is already in the queue. And then looking at how we assess equity within these growth management decisions, specifically looking at the urban growth management functional plan in Title 11. Is there changes that need to be made to have a component where you require an equity assessment within these decisions? And then also consulting with tribes, same sort of thing there. Should Title 11 be amended in any particular way to require some tribal consultation? That is it. The council has to make a decision by the end of the year. MTAC is making a recommendation in a little bit, and it will go to MPAC. MPAC will make a recommendation and ultimately will go to the Metro Council. High level overview. Any questions? We're here to help support.
Very good. Thank you for the information. I think, what I'm kind of curious about, it stems from, I think the last meeting I was at, Councilor Nolan made a comment about, the way that the state kind of dictates the approval of an expansion is really just all about, do you need these additional things? And if you don't show a need for the additional housing or jobs, then has to be denied effectively. Yeah, and so because so much of this is tied into the growth of assumptions we make, whether it be low, mid, or high, the outcome is baked into the cake, right? If you take the midpoint or the high point, you look like you have a need. If you take the low point, it looks like there is no need. And so what I'm kind of trying to understand is the conditions of approval, whether it be like increased density. I think as an example, theoretically, home building more is better in our current environment, right? So you could, this is really just the latitude of the Metro Council that says, we're going to pick a number. It's going to be 9 units, per acre, and that's what we want. How does that get kind of navigated? How does the density requirement as a condition of approval get navigated, especially in a disconnect situation where Sherwood kind of came up with a number, somehow there was some miscommunication with that. Now the number's higher, and Sherwood kind of says, hey, this really changes our plans if we have a higher level of density, and we've done a lot of work on this already. Does that all make sense? I'm not sure how to navigate that. I know, I'm sorry, it's a lot of like circular commentary on my part.
I really appreciate the question. I think it is a bit of a gray area, so to speak, right? There are some really clear requirements. There's also the fact that Sherwood went and did a big community engagement process to get the community comfortable with what's being proposed, and that's what they're bringing to the table. I think there was also a lot of confusion, as you mentioned, Councillor, with the numbers. So it added a lot of confusion about what do they have to do and versus what does maybe some of the decision makers want to see happen out there. I think that, just being really blunt, is somewhat political, right? They have to negotiate and find the sweet spot of what the community can accept, and also what the decision makers can agree is best for the region. So I think that process just is going on right now. There's a lot of ongoing conversations about that. Several of us did reach out to Sherwood just to touch base with them ahead of the MTAC meeting today. And we understand from them that there are a lot of conversations going on right now to find that sweet spot and middle ground. Everyone seems very positive and supportive of the expansion request moving forward, and optimistic that they will find the right language to capture the density levels that everyone will be comfortable with.
Very good. I appreciate that. Martha, you want to weigh in?
I wanted to jump in a little bit, because I think that that is a good question. And I think this idea of, how do you pick the number is part science and part political, right? Because you're right, there are requirements under state law in the way the analysis has to be done. There are minimums that a city like Sherwood would have to meet in terms of density, but historically, the analysis, and I think what was envisioned under state law, was just looking at supply versus demand. It was just this very sort of flat numerical analysis. And I think what has been realized over the last several decades of doing this is like, that doesn't work. There's no magic ball. We don't know exactly what the future is going to look like. And it benefits everybody to sort of understand what the expected range of possibilities are. And so Metro has been, at least on the housing side, leaning a lot more toward providing this range of possibilities. And the reason that Metro doesn't know, and that Sherwood doesn't know really how many housing units or what density is going to happen, is we can't predict, for example, how much middle housing is going to be built in what were traditionally single family zones. And so you have to sort of make assumptions of what percentage might develop as middle housing versus not. And so you end up with this range of possibilities, and the outcome, I think, is better to be able to sort of look at the range and pick sort of what you think your expectation might be. But it also creates this situation where, like Laura mentioned, the urban growth report really had a very wide range of possibilities to pick from this time, wider than it ever has before. So then at some point it does come down to this more political decision. But there are minimum requirements that are written into state law, and those have been met through all of these various analyses.
Very good. I mean, I think that makes sense. And I guess, you know, in my mind, common sense would say if we plan going forward and because housing creation takes time, you're going to want to, if you err on the side of building more than building less moving forward. Of course, the flip side is overproduction will bring down home prices, which is kind of the ultimate goal. Of course, all boats float on the same ocean, and bringing down regional home prices to that scale is probably not even remotely possible, but that's a whole different conversation. Mayor Milch, I see your hand is up.
I'm trying to analogize this to what happens at local level when we do planning hearings and we impose conditions on an applicant. It's generally up to the applicant to meet those conditions and address them in order to get approval. To what extent is the city of Sherwood sort of exclusively responsible for meeting these conditions, or because it's a regional growth, does the region share in the responsibility for these potential conditions that you outlined? I don't want the city of Sherwood to just have the right to say, well, we don't want it to be that dense, therefore we'll withdraw the application and the region will suffer and no one will get this employment land and this new housing. So how is that going to work?
That's a great question. And I think we're in a unique situation right now, right? Where there's been some kind of back and forth with the city on this. My understanding is the conditions to allow the expansion that's been requested by Sherwood will be specifically applicable to the city of Sherwood. That doesn't mean that Sherwood is beholden to still move forward with the application for the expansion. If they decided they don't want to meet those conditions, I believe it would be within their right to withdraw their application, which would create a whole nother can of worms, because then we would have identified a need for expansion and have no candidates to choose from. So I'll just leave that right there. But I think ultimately it is Sherwood's responsibility. And as I said before, I think there's optimism and a lot of work going on behind the scenes to find that, to thread the needle, find a sweet spot that everyone's comfortable with and be able to move forward and support all the outcomes that we're working toward.
Very good. Thank you for the comments, Commissioner Sandus.
Yeah, it's kind of brings me back. I'm more of a systems thinker than I am being myopic about one mode or one density level or whatnot. So in that greater scheme of things, Councilor Sherman, you've shared with many of us those units that were built out in Happy Valley that aren't selling, and how much of that is because there's no transit, right? And transit typically in this country does not really do or prefer to serve, well, it's expensive to serve suburban areas, but yet the market families, growing families, seem to gravitate towards suburban type living, right? And the American dream, whatnot. And as we're watching again that commute shed issue with people living all around Southwest Washington, as you mentioned, you heard me say this before, I'm really wondering if that is frankly, it's not only outpacing our efforts, but the reliance upon our transportation system to serve that is a strain on all of us, let alone all the other infrastructure. So I'm just kind of concerned that we might be building, and there's areas around the country that have done this, high density projects without transit in suburban areas, and yet the reliance on a vehicle is flooding the streets with cars and whatnot and making life difficult for them. So I think Happy Valley might have a couple case studies or examples of where maybe it's going to work or not work. But I just don't know how we get there without, again, making those things work and marketable. And maybe you can share again that cottage cluster project that have not sold. Could you just do that again, sir?
Sure. We had our first two applications for cottage clusters in Happy Valley. The first one was completed, and I'm gonna guess on the numbers. It's 6 units, Laura, or 8 units they put on Ridgequest, Bill's project. Oh, 8, okay. And I think they originally came in they're 1,000 square feet, 2-story. They came in at $480,000 per unit. So 480 bucks a square foot. They're currently down. Well, before I think he's actually pulled them off the market now because even down to 430 a square foot, they weren't selling at all. They have the closest public transportation is probably 2-mile walk from that area, plus or minus. There is no local shopping there. There are no local resources for these. Off-street parking is minimal at best, and we're already seeing cars parked illegally on the main road, Ridgecrest in the bike lane, also in the neighborhood, which is not being useful so far. And now we have our second project that is in progress. Same road up a little higher up the hillside, but same thing. It's in an area that has no public transportation, no sidewalks, has no shoulders, and it's a pretty sloped area, so it's not really even bike friendly to speak of. So I think those types of situations where maybe the land exists to build may not be the appropriate place to build them. And we've tried to address that in Happy Valley recently with an overlay zone that's going to kind of incent production or facilitate production in areas where we have a lot more of the utility resources, the transportation resources. But even then, it's still kind of a work in progress at this point. So a lot to be learned. Laura's way smarter in this stuff than I am, so she knows all the ins and outs of these. Anything to add, Laura? Did I hit the high points okay on that?
Nope, you got it.
Very good. Other questions, comments on the MPAC urban growth report decision? Sorry, I'm going back to my acronyms again. Wow. All right. Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this gets navigated going forward. Commissioner Mitchell, I see you there in a second, and it'll be interesting to see. I'm very curious about how the conditions of approval get put in place, just because as of our last MPAC meeting, it seemed they were still pretty vague. They're kind of like, hey, we're going to put an approval on this, but how it gets implemented, how it gets enforced, talking about like trying to preserve certain size industrial lands. I think my personal perspective is one of the main reasons, not even the housing, one of the main reasons that this was looked for approval was because we do have a lack of larger parcels for industrial areas to be competitive with like the technology world or semiconductors or whatever the heck they're using those areas for. So one of the conditions of approval may be that they have to maintain these certain size parcels. And then kind of my question I had asked at one point was just, okay, so what's the enforcement mechanism? And what if you get close? What if we say it's, the minimum parcel is going to be 50 acres, but you have an opportunity for 40 acres? Do you decline that because it's not doing what you actually want it to do? Does that change who actually explores those areas for opportunities because we put a certain conditional of approval that makes it so that the 2 25-acre parcels could have been developed and they're not? I'm just not sure in practice how that actually works. So sorry for talking so long. Commissioner Mitchell, you're up.
Councilor Sherman, you just touched on one of the things that I was going to say. I did sit on the roundtable that was part of that Metro public involvement process, and as you said, within that industrial land need, particularly large industrial parcels, is where we're way short. And kind of to Commissioner Savas's comment, when those to find big pieces of land like that, they're going to probably be out on the perimeter, and how do we get people there to work those jobs when there's not transit in that area? And the only other thing I was going to say about the process is it was incredibly detailed. There was an amazing amount of research and study that went into it, but it still comes down to a willing buyer and a willing seller, and it's all based on assumptions of how people are going to behave. Despite the fact that a tremendous amount of work went into all of those details, it's still going to be an unpredictable process. But at least we have some information to work with. So it was an interesting process for sure.
Very good. Other questions, comments, thoughts today? Commissioner Savas.
Just one that I didn't mention. I from a practical standpoint, if the region, Metro JPAC is anticipating or have as a target for transit ridership. And whatever that number is, do we need to really look and recalibrate that, and also look at calibrating whether or not these parking relief, not building high density without parking, but putting in a suburban area where there's no transit doesn't make any sense. I think sometimes I hear people say, I can't, there's a place, but there's nowhere to park. We're a 2-car family. There's no place to park. So therefore, I'm going to look somewhere else, right? I think we have to be mindful of market conditions and what is practical, especially with the advent of hydrogen powered vehicles really accelerating, frankly, not in this region, but it will. And electric cars, I think that the single occupancy vehicle, unfortunately, is going to prevail. And I think we have to look at the market and the realities and make sure we build our community smarter and more practical. And I think that is one of the conflicts in this state, is this assumption that ridership transit is going to solve all the problems. And that's a huge burden, not only on TriMet, but all of us. But I think we need to, again, be more practical and think what the market's telling us or screaming at us right now as we look at all the people that are commuting in right now, this very minute, are commuting into our region to go to work. Thank you.
Good comments. Anyone else want to chime in? Mayor Milch, you need to be careful. There's a small, very dangerous looking bird that it looks like he's about to get you. So watch out there. Very good. Anything else to add for the, for the good of the order? And there you go. Perfect. Hey, we actually might get you out of here 6-7 minutes early today. Lovely. Very good to see you all. Good commentary, good information. Really appreciate all that. And so with that, go out and have a great day. Make the world a better place, huh?